Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Breakfast Club. And hello to Taze. This is already off to a good start. Today's guest, our entomology curator, Dr. Michelle Trautwein. Hey, Michelle.
Hello.
How's it going over there?
Good. How about you?
Well, I had like some epic pandemic dreams last night that I think kept me up till 3 a.m. So I'm shaky with fatigue and a little crazy.
It turns out it's a reality, right? It's not just your nightmare.
Yeah.
It's really happening.
Right. That's the best part. Yeah. But I mean, like, and I'm sure everyone can relate. Like, enough about me. How are all you guys doing out there? Everybody's super healthy and like ready to go. Well, I guess that's here. Let me transition awkwardly. Good news. Whatever you're going through, you're not going through it alone. Michelle's actually here to tell you about like hundreds of best friends you didn't even know you had. Who live with you and on you and all kinds of things that are not scary. So get that out of your mind right now.
Right. You're so lucky. We're so lucky.
Yeah. Hello. Michelle, have you named all of your face friends yet?
Fred, George, Mary.
Okay, perfect. Well, I did actually want to ask you, like, I know like how you got started in science and that kind of stuff, which actually we should mention just because we like to bust the myth on this show that people follow a direct path. Wait, Leah, why don't you just tell us about that actually? How'd you fall for science?
Yeah, my path is pretty indirect. I never would have imagined that I would be a scientist. I was actually a studio art major when I started college. And I ended up taking an entomology class that was it just blew me away for its, the aesthetic beauty of insects, the diversity of insects. It's the first time I learned about evolution and how we classify life on the planet. And I just fell in love and then ended up doing some field work in tropical rainforests and in deserts and out on the water. And I fell in love with scientists as just curious and exciting people, and fell in love with the process of discovery, and here I am.
Yeah. And how did you kind of your focus like narrow into these like thinking about our homes as these tiny little kind of like our personal like biomes of interesting, strange, different stuff happening?
Well, one of the best things about studying insects, when I first started in science, I thought I wanted to study, killer whales, and I wanted to study wolves and all this like really exciting,
charismatic megafauna.
Yeah. But then I learned that it's actually a real pain. You have to go sit out in the freezing cold snow for months at a time, and you see like one wolf. But insects are everywhere. Arthropods, insects and their relatives, are everywhere. And that became really appealing, especially from the practical aspects of having a career in science and having kids and a life that you can't always center around your organism that you're studying, right?
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So they made it easy.
Yeah, and all of that travel must have also kind of, I imagine, sparked it to some degree, because I remember going with you to the Amazon and just like what we think of as a house and what comes in and out of those things. Like it is so different all over the world, but I guess there are probably some similarities in the systems or whatever else. But that must be different. Okay, well, you're going to talk about that, so I won't like pry on that. But so I will hand it over to you. But before I do that, I want to say a huge thank you to someone who's part of every single one of this broadcast and who you never ever see. And that is my teammate, Christina Fong, who's behind the scenes right now. I thought about trying to make her like pop on for a cameo, but I'm not 100% sure she'd forgive me for that. So thank you, Christina. We so appreciate it. This wouldn't be possible without her. So
I also want to thank Christina because she held my hand very nicely through multiple fits about not being able to handle this technology. So thank you.
Yeah. Hand holding is like, it's part of the job. It's an honor, honestly.
She did not speak to me condescendingly. She was very concerned.
Okay, well, we're excited to hear that. I love hearing about this work. I'm genuinely excited that you're here. I do want to remind people, if you're watching this live, you can ask Michelle questions anytime just by leaving in the comments, and we'll come back at the end and ask as many of those as we possibly can. So with that, I'm going to hand it over for Quarantine Life, the species in your house and on your body. Thank you, Michelle. See you at the end.
Thank you. See you. So we've all been home for months now. It seems like forever, but it's just been a couple months. And I think we're probably all feeling pretty isolated. And I want you all to stop for just a minute and think about the species that are in lockdown with you. So when I think about the species in my house, the big kind of more charismatic ones come to mind. Maybe you're in lockdown with a Canis familiaris, a dog. Maybe you're in lockdown with a Felis domesticus, if you're lucky. I hear mine at my door right now. What a pain. But when we think of biodiversity and species, I think our minds go to tropical rainforests or coral reefs, places that really have a lot of biodiversity. But the truth is, species are everywhere. This really fantastic species richness is everywhere in our world, including cities like this, including houses like this. And there's even species, tons of species that live on and in your body. So I'm an entomologist, which means I study insects and their relatives, or arthropods, I'll call them. And these are animals that have exoskeletons and a lot of legs and a lot of antennae, and they make up the vast majority of multicellular life on the planet. So when you think about life on Earth, it's dominated by arthropods. And so there's about 1 million described species of insects, but the truth is there's likely many, many millions more, maybe 10 million, maybe 20 million, maybe 50 million species of insects on the planet. So there's so much to be discovered, so much yet to be understood about insects all over the world, and not just in rainforests, but also in our houses. So for the past few years, I've been studying the arthropods that live in our houses all over the world. And I've been focusing with a team of people, not just on pest species. Most people think of cockroaches and termites, but I've been focusing on this really wide diversity of bugs that live in houses and bugs that are associated with humans. So my study started in North Carolina, but we since have gone around the world and studied arthropods in houses in San Francisco, on remote islands off the coast of Sweden, on the banks of the Peruvian Amazon, in urban Japan, and in the Australian bush. And I have to say that Laurel, our host, has been with me on several of these really exciting adventures. So I also study arthropods that live on our bodies. So these are our face mites. And I'm sorry if you've never heard about them before to be the one to break the news to you that you've got arthropods that live on your body, but yay, you do. Like the arthropods in our houses, I've been studying the global diversity of face mites. And so with my team, we've sampled about 2,000 people from over 90 different countries from all over the world for their face mites. And we've sampled people in the United States. We've sampled people from all over, including most recently, we had the privilege to be able to sample a hunter-gatherer group in Namibia for their face mites. And so we really have gotten this very interesting global snapshot of the arthropods that live on your body. So now I'm going to tell you the 10 most interesting things about the arthropod species that are in quarantine with you right now. The first thing is that there is a ton of them, really. So this is a box of arthropods that we collected from a single house in North Carolina. Each of those little boxes in this drawer represents a single room. So this was not a house that had its windows open in the woods. This was a very clean suburban house with a weekly house cleaner. And so what we found in looking at houses all over the world is that they're all full of arthropods. On average, there's about 100 different types of arthropod species in a typical house. And this is, again, across the board in every house we've ever been to. Tons of arthropods. When you look at that arthropod diversity, here's how it generally breaks down. This is representative of North Carolina, but again, it's true we found it to be true all over the world. A lot of flies, a lot of spiders, a lot of beetles, and a lot of ants, which are a group that also include wasps, and then a whole bunch of other tiny groups, some of which you may or may not be familiar with. And what this doesn't include is a whole lot of pest species. So we find a ton of diversity in houses and not a ton of pest species. And now quickly, just to our bodies, the diversity of arthropods that you're in quarantine with doesn't just include the little things crawling around your house, but also the things crawling around your body. And you're lucky enough to have at least 2 different species of mites that live on your body. The long skinny one there is called Demodex folliculorum. And next to it is its short tubby cousin, Demodex brevis. And these mites live all over your body, but they're concentrated on your face. But they also live in your ear canals and in your nose and in your nipples and your genitals. So they're everywhere. And they're very understudied. And one of the interesting things about them is that we don't know how much diversity there is. So we don't know if the mites in your ears are the same as the mites in your nose or on your genitals or in your eyelid margins. So there's a lot still to learn about these arthropods that are living on your body right now. Okay, the second thing is that some of the most common bugs in your house are species that you've never even heard of. And this was really exciting to me as I did this project, that there could be certain types of insects or arthropods that were in most rooms of most houses all over the world, yet at the same time, they were animals that people have never heard of. So there are these real mysteries inside your house. So here's a picture of the most common things we found in houses. And here they are. The first one, let me see if can you guys see that? Okay. The first one, that's a gall midge, a tiny, tiny fly that's just a couple millimeters big. And I'll talk about them later. Here's an ant. You guys are familiar with that. This is a carpet beetle, very prevalent in houses. A cobweb spider here. A dark-winged fungus gnat, a cellar spider, a scuttlefly, and a book louse. And I'm going to talk about some of these critters a little bit more. But when people complain about the bugs in their houses, like, have you ever heard them complain about their scuttleflies? They may not, but they are everywhere. Okay, this is actually my favorite point about the arthropods, both in our houses and our bodies. They're not just these pests or parasites in our life, they're also these incredible storytellers that can inform us about our past. So I'm going to start with these 2. So as humans, we evolved in Africa about 200 or maybe 300,000 years ago. And about 65,000 years ago, we had a big successful migration out of Africa. But when we left Africa, we didn't go alone. We carried this whole suite of species with us. And that included a lot of arthropods that still live in our houses today. These are 2 flies that are 2 of my favorite examples. One is a housefly, Musca domesticus, and then I'm confusing that with Musca domestica. I'm confusing that with a dog. And a Drosophila species. And both of these flies have their origins in Africa. And as we left and migrated around the world, these flies literally crossed oceans and continents to be with us. And we can see in their genetic history that they also originated in Africa and have spread all around the world with us. So a lot of these arthropods in our houses are really ancient roommates in respect to their companionship with humans. Our face mites, the arthropods in our bodies, are also tell ancient stories about us and inform us about our past. So one of the very cool things we've discovered is that face mites, so different people from different parts of the world host different lineages of face mites. So that means if you're of South Asian ancestry, you very well may host a South Asian specific lineage of face mites. If you're of African ancestry or European ancestry, you host really specific lineages of face mite. And what's very cool is those lineages are persistent. So for example, when we sample African Americans that have lived in the United States for many generations, they often still host very distinctly African face mites. So your face mites can tell you something about your ancestry. And again, some of the arthropods in our houses can tell us more about where we originally came from as well. Okay, the fourth very cool thing about the arthropods in your house is that they make up an ecosystem. So there's a real ecosystem in your house. It's not just the random things that flew in through the window. There's real natural history happening in your house. So for example, there's top predators. These are like the lions of the Serengeti. This is a house centipede. And there's a species of house centipede that's globally distributed. It lives all over the world. It loves human houses because of the things that are drawn to them. And it's a vicious top predator, but very refined. Look, there you see on a carpet. When we collected so many of these arthropods in houses, many had already been collected for us. So there is signs of this food web in your house, right? In this literal cobweb here. So spiders do a lot of collecting and a lot of the predation in houses. This is just one of our favorite spider characters that we collected in several houses in North Carolina. This is a spitting spider. This spider can actually spit its venom several centimeters to paralyze its prey. This was a beautiful spitting spider that became our lab mascot for quite a while. She laid babies. We hoped it was going to be a generational relationship, but she then ate them all very quickly, and that ended our love affair with this spitting spider. But generally, they're these crazy, she's just an example of these, crazy beasts that live in your house that do bizarre and amazing things that we don't often think about. So I did mention that a lot of the things that are in your house get there by accident. They're ill-fated tourists. They come in through the window, they die on the windowsill, and that's unfortunate for them. But at the same time, they're an important part of this household ecosystem because they end up being food for a lot of those predators. Now here's another unfortunately passed away little beauty in a house, and it's a tiny parasitoid wasp. So when I mentioned before that arthropods make up most of the diversity of multicellular life on the planet, one of the major groups that's super hyper diverse are these tiny, practically microscopic wasps that are parasitoids of a lot of other arthropods. And we found a lot of parasitoid wasps in houses, and they mostly aren't accidental tourists. They are there to parasitize the more common arthropod species in your house. So there's one in particular, one that parasitizes the egg cases of cockroaches. And so they want to be there. They love to be in your house and to be part of that indoor food web. So we found that there's some predictable elements to this ecosystem in your house. By looking at many, many houses and analyzing how the diversity occurred between houses and within houses, we found that there are these predictable patterns. So for example, basements host a really different type of community than the rest of the upstairs floors of a house. Arthropod diversity decreases as you go up. So if you live on the 20th floor of an apartment building, you're probably going to have fewer arthropods than if you live at the ground floor, which provides a lot of different entryways. We found there was more arthropods in rooms that had carpet. It's probably just because dead bodies get caught in carpet, so they accumulated more there. Diversity, of course, increased in rooms with more doors and windows, and as such, we found that living rooms often had the most arthropods, and that's probably because of their size and their access in terms of doors and windows. So the fifth most exciting thing about the arthropods in your quarantine life are that there are babies. Here's one of my favorite babies. This is the baby of a carpet beetle. And look at that gorgeous hairdo. Here's another one. Look at that tail. Oh my gosh. These are beautiful babies. Here's another one. So fluffy. So carpet beetles are really common in houses all over the world. They love to be part of the human indoor ecosystem, particularly as babies. Adult carpet beetles often go off and live outdoors, but baby carpet beetles love to live indoors. They can cause some trouble. They can, eat wool rugs or wool sweaters, but they like to eat any organic bits. So here's a bunch of little furry babies eating a little piece of dog kibble. We had an infamous moment where my colleague Matt Bertone, who took most of the pictures in this presentation, found these beautiful babies eating fingernail clippings, which was gross. That was a gross day. But these little beetle babies like to eat anything, and they are really fluffy and lovely. Speaking of babies, this is moving on to face mites. There's also baby face mites. Oh, let me see if I can make this video play. Oh, I can't, but that was a video of a face mite giving birth to a big egg that's like half the size of her body. So baby face mites are being born on your body all the time, which is a lovely, lovely thought. Okay, next, the sixth most exciting thing about the arthropods that you're in quarantine with are that they're lice. There's lice in your house. So often when we think of lice, we think of head lice, which are a real pain. As a parent of young kids, I'm sure many of you can relate to the maddening aspects of head lice. But I'm talking about head lice's cousin, book lice. And here is one right here. You can see he's a real cutie. Book lice are tiny. For perspective, that's a mosquito leg. So book lice are very small. And we find them in almost every house we've ever looked in all over the world. We, in particular, found a lot here in San Francisco. So if you're local, you've got book lice in your house. Now, just because you don't see them doesn't mean you don't have them. Book lice are very tiny, 1 millimeter. They're this almost light, so they're not translucent, but they're this really light color, so they can be hard to see. You really got to look closely. We find them often on windowsills, baseboards. They can be associated with books, but we find them mostly on windowsills and baseboards. They're tiny little vacuum cleaners just eating organic bits in your house. And look at them, they're tiny, they're flat. They have origins in nests. So they're a nest dwelling creature, probably evolved from things like birds' nests and early mammal nests. And now they live in our more urban nests. So be proud that you have these beautiful book lice in your house. The seventh most exciting thing about the arthropods in your life is that there are more flies in your house than any other group of animals. So this is really exciting to me because I'm a fly systematist, so I'm the fly curator at the California Academy of Sciences. I love flies and can go on and on about their many positive traits. But let me just tell you about some of the flies in your house. So I had mentioned before that we find gall midges in every house. This is one of the most common types of arthropods we find in houses. So gall midges are very, very tiny flies. They're, again, like 1 millimeter, a couple millimeters. And they're so small, they don't even really fly. They're kind of like the plankton of the air, and they just hover and sort of drift in the wind. And so it's possible that the reason there's so many in your house is simply because they just get filtered in. Gall midges have a close association with different specific plant species. They cause galls in plants. But they're hyper diverse. So for example, there was a study done recently by my group of fly colleagues, and they did an inventory of a small plot of land in Costa Rica, and they characterized all the flies, every single fly that they collected in this one small plot of land in Costa Rica. And the fly scientist in Europe who was identifying the gall midges was sorting through them, identified something like 9,000 gall midges in this small plot of land, 9,000 different species. And at that point said, all right, that's it. No more. I'm done describing gall midges. There's so many, there's more than 9,000 in this one small plot of land. And so when you extrapolate out, it's possible that there's 1 million species of gall midges out there that are yet to be described. So this is just a huge chunk of undescribed diversity on the planet. So there's likely many undescribed types of gall midges floating around houses all over the world right now. Here's another lovely fly that is almost certainly in your house. It's a moth fly or a drain fly. And look, he is really fuzzy, which I guess is why they're called moth flies, because moths are covered with scales like that. But he's really a furry beauty. They're very easy to identify because they've got that little heart shape. They're also just a few millimeters, delicate little beauties. But they do feed on, the sewage and gunk in your drains. So there is that aspect. That less beautiful aspect to them. But again, this is an example of a group of flies that are globally associated with humans and found in sinks and tubs all over the world. So number 8, most interesting thing is that you live with one of the fastest spinning animals on Earth. And I included this because I just recently came across a very cool video of one of my entomology colleagues and a discovery that he made. And so I wanted to broaden your mind about these tiny creatures in our daily lives. So in almost every house, or maybe every house we looked at, we found these tiny insect relatives called springtails. Or columbolans. And these are subterranean, again, very small animals, a few millimeters. They live in soil all over, but also we found them in houses everywhere. Here are some beautiful pictures of how adorable springtails are. You can see here, they're very chubby. And the one that this video was made about is this round chonker right here. And Christina, if you could play that video, I just want you to see a little bit of what these springtails can do.
You're about to watch this globular springtail jump and spin faster than any other animal on Earth. Ready?
So that was a discovery made by Dr. Adrian Smith, who works at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And he basically found all these springtails on his trash can and filmed them. And they do this incredible jump that you can see and spin so fast. And if you go to that video on YouTube, you can see that he goes on to say that these springtails spin faster than the rotors of a helicopter. So they're just incredibly fast. Now, before I say that they're the fastest animal on Earth, which I know he says, I have to acknowledge that we have a colleague, an arachnologist at the Cal Academy, Sarah Cruz, who also studies some fast spinning. She studies these spiders that do a really quick pivot to get their prey. And I know that they are exceedingly fast also. So who's the fastest? I'm not sure, but probably you can find both of them in your house. And again, it just highlights the fact that in your house are these incredibly bizarre creatures with these incredibly unusual skills and life histories, all while we're just kind of living our mundane daily lives here on lockdown. So the 9th most interesting thing that we discovered about arthropods in houses is that houses in wealthy neighborhoods actually hosted more types of arthropods, which was in some ways unexpected and in some ways not. So this actually fits into this phenomenon that's been described before called the luxury effect. And the luxury effect is is this phenomenon that there's more species in wealthy areas, in urban regions. But it's mostly been described in respect to plants and vegetation. And this was the first time it was described regarding the indoors. And so it's interesting to think about how these landscape variables, these aspects of your neighborhood and your city, really have cascading effects down to your living room. And what was interesting was that we found that houses in wealthy areas didn't necessarily need to have a lot of vegetation around them, in particular, to have a lot of arthropod diversity. Instead, it seems like they benefited from their neighborhood scale vegetation. So that reflects the fact that all over the world, and this is just an image from a Google satellite view, but all over the world, if you look at cities, the wealthier areas of cities have a lot more vegetation. This is a global trend, and so animals, including arthropods, respond to that, and as such, you have more arthropods in your house if you live in a more wealthy area of town. So the 10th most exciting thing that I want to share with you today is that you can help us make discoveries about the species in your house while you're on lockdown, helping protect your community and the world from coronavirus. So we went all over the world on these arthropod hunting expeditions, which were really intense, time-consuming expeditions. And we got to sample arthropods in really interesting places. But in order to get a more fine-scale picture of arthropods in houses from all over the world, we really need your help. So you can go on iNaturalist, and I always Google iNaturalist and Never Home Alone, and we have a project which now has over 11,000 observations. And these are all pictures people have taken in their houses of the arthropods and other species they come across indoors. And so while you're home alone, think supposedly alone, trying to come up with what to do next, get out your phone and take some pictures of the species inside your house, upload them to iNaturalist, to this project, and hopefully we're trying to get up to 20,000 observations from all over the world. And then we're going to do some analyses to understand more about these global patterns of indoor diversity. So please help us. It'll be fun. And before I go, I want to thank so many people for helping me with both these projects. Here's my Arthropods of Our Homes team that has done so much work to make the discoveries I've mentioned today, and my FaceMite team. Thank you all and for listening, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
We have some. I really feel that was like you said so many hilarious things that I think people were cracking up about at home, and I was like, we should have just gotten her a laugh track so you could have some feedback, because I knew that was going to happen. I think
it's better to not have one, because I'll be honest that when you're actually looking at people and you say things that you think are funny and no one laughs, that it kills a little bit of your inside. But if you can't hear anything, it's like, great, I know it's funny to me.
Right, but then all you can do is go like, and then move on. It's a tough one either way. But I liked in the beginning when you said that a lot of these species crossed oceans and continents to be with us. Like they did, they love us so much, they'll do anything for us. They just want to be there. Yeah. Also, if you send us a video of the FaceMite giving birth, we can drop it in the comment section, because I think that probably is something people want to see.
Yeah.
But we do have questions. So Jason asks, how do FaceMites actually get on your face in the first place, and do they wash off?
They don't wash off, so don't get your hopes up. And we think that you are colonized shortly after birth. So we think that as soon as you have close physical contact with most likely your mother, but a parent or any other caregiver, they're you're colonized early on. So they really are only transferred with close physical contact. You don't get them from strangers or, kissing cheeks and things like that. They're really from close contact.
Okay, that kind of relates to Kelly asked, do face mites ever move from one person's face to another?
They do, but you seem to keep the ones that are innate to you. So we have found that spouses or partners share face mites, but overall, people really have their own face mites. They're almost like a proxy for your DNA.
Oh, cool.
Like a face mite fingerprint.
Yeah, that's weird. That has I would right now I touch my computer to make it wake up, but in the future, maybe we could just press our whole face on the keyboard, have it be even more secure. Sarah would like to know what country's houses have the most insects.
Oh, I doubt they'll be, well, actually, I don't know. I assume that across the tropics where insect diversity, increases, that those areas will have the most species in houses.
Mm-hmm.
I already know, for example, having done sampled a lot of houses in North Carolina versus San Francisco, I know there's way more arthropods in houses in North Carolina where it's warmer, where there's more diversity. But at the same time, even though the arthropods are smaller here, there's still plenty.
Yeah, and it doesn't have. We got a couple questions that were basically asking if there's if you are very if you're a dirty person, like a dirty housekeeper versus a very tidy housekeeper.
Yeah.
What the impact of that is, or whether that's visible.
Yeah. And so we were really looking at diversity, not abundance. And so that's an important thing to consider. If you had an infestation of 2,000 ants, we counted that still as one species of ant. But that being said, we did a lot of analyses and we found no association of diversity with house cleanliness, with whether or not you had a regular pesticide treatment, which essentially gets to the fact that, arthropods are unstoppable. They're going to be in your house. They are in your house.
They love us and they're unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Franz wanted to know whether book lice are visible to the naked eye.
They are. Yeah. Yeah. They're just hard to see. So you have to really be, I was just looking at my own baseboards. You really have to look for them. And so I didn't get into the details of how we sampled, but we had a team of professional entomologists, PhD entomologists that went into every house and were on our hands and knees with lamps. And so we really, and once we started finding book lice, we loved it. So we were excited to find them in every house. So we really made a deliberate effort to find those tiny, tiny creatures.
Yeah, they're cool. I like them. Barb wanted to know, how do you actually collect face mites to test?
So a lot of different ways. Luckily, in terms of, I mentioned we've sampled over 2,000 people, and luckily we've been able to just swab faces, and we've just looked for face mite DNA. So I don't actually have to find real face mites, which can take a lot of work and is challenging. But there's a lot of ways to sample face mites. You can pluck hairs. You can scrape your face and put the gunk under a microscope. Face mites aren't visible to the naked eye, so you do need to have a microscope to see them.
Okay. That's related to Bob's question. He asked, what magnification do you need to see face mites well?
So I can find them at 100 or 200, but to really see them close up, that's 400.
Okay. This YouTube person asked, do the fluffy, cute babies cause eczema?
Thank you for acknowledging their fluffy cuteness.
It's undeniable. I mean,
I don't know. So some arthropods do cause trouble for people. Dust mites, for example, which I didn't mention in this talk, but are another group that we found in almost every house we sampled. And we had a special vacuum cleaner for dust mites. The parts of their proteins in their exoskeleton can cause asthma and other things. So I don't know about eczema, but I know people do occasionally have weird reactions to arthropods.
All kinds of things.
Yeah. You especially.
Hey now. Yes, that's absolutely true. I'm a sensitive creature. This is how it is. We got like a whole kind of like handful of questions that were specific to face mites and what they cause or don't cause on humans, and rosacea came up, and I wondered what we know about any of those relationships, if anything.
Yeah, so face mites are on everybody, and so they seem to be benign on most people, but they seem to be associated and likely causative in a few disorders, particularly rosacea and some conditions of the eye. Called blepharitis, which, so face mites live in your eyelid margins, and sometimes they can cause trouble. And exactly, there's a lot of things we could imagine that they sometimes, just by overpopulating, they stretch out the follicles, they consume skin cells, they are associated with bacteria that likely, can be inflammatory. So face mites can go wrong, but generally, for the vast majority of people, they're okay.
That sounds like a TV show when face mites go wrong. So are face mites something that are on dermatologists' radar today? Like that's something that they kind of know about or understand?
Yeah, dermatologists and ophthalmologists. Although I have to tell you, for most dermatologists and ophthalmologists that I know, they are not as into face mites as I wish they were.
We could just start a campaign where we share this video with every dermatology office.
They know about it. They just don't care. I think it's because they their relationship with a lot of skin health is not clear necessarily in all cases, and so I think they just get. Also, they're hard to study. They're microscopic.
Yeah.
They're, probably, dealing with skin cancer and things like that. And they're not, microscopic face mites, but.
Yeah. Well, Bob, who is one of our regular Breakfast Club watchers. So thank you, Bob. He actually asked a second question that kind of gets at that too, where you had mentioned at some point that we just don't know a whole lot or everything about face mites, and he wondered whether that was due to some sort of like taxonomy question or mystery that we hadn't answered, or just undersampling, or like what needs to happen so that we would understand that further.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the reason I'm so interested in face mites is because it's so shocking to me that something that is so intimately related to all of us, right, on all of our bodies, and but yet we know so little about it. Almost every question you have about face mites is yet to be answered.
Yeah.
So you mentioned taxonomy. I said there's a lot of diversity associated with host ancestry, but maybe there's also diversity associated with regions of the human body. We don't know that, so it's a lot of exploration yet to be done. We don't know a lot about their life cycle because they can't be cultured. They can't live off of our body. Basically anything you want to know about face mites is unknown.
Yeah. Well, hey, good job choosing an area of study. You can never retire. Yeah.
There's a lot of money in face mites.
Yeah. Well, you were going to be an artist before, so it's like, who knows? Nonprofit, whatever. It's all nonprofit. Yeah. So I'll just do two more here. Allison. Oh, hello, Allison. Any advice on how to find springtails?
Springtails. Let me think. Well, so I definitely see them in potted plants. They're soil associated. I mean, gosh, we just found them all over, but mostly probably from like dust sampling. Again, windowsills, counters. I'd expect them to be in moist, dark environments, but to be honest, we found them everywhere.
Right.
I mean, again, not in abundance, but I don't know. This the video of Dr. Adrian Smith made were on his trash can. They also, some of them can be on the surface of water. I know he did another video about them on the surface of pond water. But they're soil associates. Yeah.
They made the little jumpy things on the trash can just made me think about a little flea circus, like a little on your curb. Okay, let's see here. One more. Okay, this is from Danielle, but a few other people at least asked this too. Can people sign up to have their face mites tested?
So for a while, we did do that. But then since we've sampled 2,000 people, we've maxed out. We're in our analysis phase. And so it may be that we open up another project and start asking different questions. Like I said, there's so many to be asked, but for now we're good. But thank you very much for the offer.
Right. Yeah. And you really only want interesting people, right? Like people with interesting,
like
backgrounds.
If you're from Cameroon, then yes, I want your face.
Call me. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. That was so fun. And if you've asked a question and we didn't get to it, we'll try to loop back later and answer that in comments. And then before we go, I just want to say 2 things that are coming up. So Tuesday, May 12th, 10 a.m., we'll have one of Michelle's colleagues, Dr. Brian Fisher, who's also an entomology curator, and he's going to talk about this project he is doing in Madagascar where they're creating and using cricket powder basically to address the twin problems of malnutrition and habitat loss, which are very much intertwined. And then tonight, 7 p.m., come right back here for night school, which is one of the really special things we do every other Thursday. And tonight there will be a tour of the San Francisco Conservatory of Flowers' most incredible blooms streamed directly to you from their building. And not only will you hear from their curator, Ryan Gillow, sorry if that's pronounced wrong, you'll also hear from our botany curator, Natalie Nagalingam, who's been on Breakfast Club before and was wildly popular for her Name a Fern contest, among other things. And she's going to actually dissect a flower on screen and talk about how the reproductive structure. So it should be super cool. Michelle, thank you for sitting through my my outro. I think they call it an outro, the professionals. I don't know. But that's it. That's what we've got. Michelle, thank you again. Viewers, thank you again. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.